Well, we're in James. We're officially starting off, and right away we get some powerful words. You might be wondering, Pastor, why do you have James on fire? Good question. Because I believe that James is Spirit-breathed, and the Spirit is represented by fire. Because each of these powerful truths, in many ways that we're going to go through, these back-to-basic questions of James, have their rooting in living a Christian life. And the beginning of the Christian life comes when the Holy Spirit dwells upon you, when you first call upon Christ. And so the way we do these things isn't on our own. And if any of these weeks seem to challenge you more than others, know that's okay. That the Spirit is there to help you with this, that this is a journey, that we're growing in discipleship. So that is what we're doing. We're going back to basics. The powerful truths of bedrock Christianity to help us amidst all the things in our lives, both as our church struggles, as we struggle, as our nation struggles, when we feel discontent, when we don't have energy, when we wonder how we're going to make it through. These were the words James wrote to a church in a similar way. Yeah, it was 2,000 years ago that he wrote it, but it was the same problems. People being persecuted more than we are, starving, facing hardships, and wondering if this Christian thing had any real help for them. Wondering how they were going to make it through, what they should do. And so to give them strength, to enhearten them, James wrote these words. And so in similar ways, we have a similar landscape, do we not? The world today, nicer for many, is a lot of the same things for many, many others. Particularly in this Monongahela Valley, where industry has left, where people are struggling, the current outlook is not everything's prosperous. And with everything of inflation and hardships going up, there's more people struggling to put food on the table. There's more people wondering how they're going to pay rent. There's more people making decisions between, do I eat today or do I take care of my family today? And each of us faces these questions. And each of us seems to be facing more medical issues in our lives, whether from old age or even when you're young. There's many people going back to school and what that means as their children start school and needing daycare and the money that calls for. There are hard things in everyone's lives. So not only is it in our church where we wonder, do we have energy, do we have hope, do we know what to do, but in the world around us, these basics are what we need. Back to basic energy. And so our first one, you may have noticed there, was on faith. But there's many more in this list. But all of them have a rooting, I believe, and how James opens his letter is on perspective. What does it mean to have the right perspective? Well, how we look at the world, I believe, changes how we live in the world. I think it truly does. How you envision your path forward, how you see reality to be, how you think you are able to overcome obstacles, or what you think the obstacles are, will impact how you live your life. If you don't think you can do it, you're not going to do it. Flat out. Our mindsets, our assumptions, often have far more impact on how we live, how we act, how we react day to day than what we might think they do. And so part of a Christian life is learning to grow not just spiritually, but mentally, and how we have a good perspective. So in the opening of the book, James has a lot to say about perspective, I believe, for the Christians of the church. Because James knows that where their focus is where their life will be. If it's all on the fact that they're starving and have no one to help, that they're being persecuted, that there's no good things, they're going to lose hope. And they're not going to persevere. They're going to struggle harder than they need to. But if their perspective is on the fact that God is with them, that they have been saved, that they don't walk alone, that they can make it through, they have a better shot, don't they? See, by focusing on the world, its perspectives, we'll live as the world wants us to. often just cogs in a machine to be used up and spit out, barely helped, and thank you very much by the time you're 48 and left to figure things out at the end. And many of these people are left unhappy, unmotivated, you name it. By focusing on God, Jesus' perspective, we'll live as Christ wants us to, and often we find ourselves joyful, determined, capable. See, the challenge of today, I think, is that we are overfilled and readily available information. I covered my mic there. There's too much information presented to us. So I want you to consider this. During a regular week, how much time do you find yourselves devoted to absorbing information from the world? Reading news, talking to friends, pulling up your phones and watching videos about things, hearing information from the world. Now, how much time do you find yourselves devoting to absorbing information from God? What is the comparable amount ratio here? Because if it's only Sunday morning for 40 minutes, and the rest of the time is devoted to the world, it's going to be a lot harder. The way we think, act, react, discern, feel are all guided by what our mental space, our spiritual space, is being fed. How we respond to tragedy, hardship, economic difficulties is guided by where our perspective is. What is our grounding for living and moving through adversity? Because inevitably these scenarios will arrive. We don't live in perfection yet. And even a Christian life will face hardship. Because we're not at heaven yet, sadly. And the troubles of this world will come to our doorstep one way or another. And so James speaks of trials. The Christian attitude toward trials and suffering, if you think about it, is actually very legendary. It's the stuff, as commentaries write, stories shaping examples throughout history and the heritage of Israel. Just think about it. You read through the Bible, you have stories like Job, Joseph, thrown into slavery, Daniel, taken to a land not his own, early church leaders, all persecuted, and then church history through the 2,000 years, martyrs, every decade and century. And in all these cases, even though they run the spectrum of the awful things that humans can do to another, and that the world can throw at them, it was often met with prayer, steadfastness, and peace. Because the world, the way you live and react to these things would be anger, aggression, and violence. The Christian way is much different. So let us read these words, my friends. My brothers and sisters, whenever you face various trials, consider it all joy. Because you know that the testing of your faith produces endurance, and that endurance complete its work, so that you may be complete and whole, lacking in nothing. Now, most likely what James is writing here isn't about every single thing that you might consider a trial or difficulty. Often, too many times, we read into the Bible or in our own lives, every single thing we have is a trial. Something that we must persevere through, that God sent to us. But that's probably not really the case. What James is talking about here is primarily to the church that he was addressing. Their economics and their socio-political status. What that means is the hardships they face in their lives and the hardships of the political scene affecting their lives. Sounds pretty the same today. Pick your political party, you still have political hardships. Live anywhere and you still have your economic hardships. It's not that hard to tie these words together today. So it's important to not overgeneralize, but I also do believe that it's important to not over-specify. Because there are different trials that each of us face. And James was writing to a particular church in time, but he would write a similar letter to each church in our time, to your life. And James is not talking about simply being happy about suffering. That's the furthest thing that the Bible's trying to tell you to be. You're not supposed to be happy about suffering. And James is not talking about all trials. What James is talking about is facing trials presented to us in our lives as we live in a broken world. James is talking about how we're to understand those trials in order to be able to live in a broken world. It's not to be happy, but to know the outcome. James isn't saying, hey, just buck up and be happy that you're suffering. That doesn't really sound right. That doesn't feel right. But that is sometimes what Christianity seems to present to the world. That's what we're doing, that we're saying, hey, just be happy. It's fine. Suffering's okay. No. As the commentary Douglas Moo points it, it says this: the idea then is not that trials determine whether a person has faith or not. Rather, they strengthen the faith that's already there. See, what James is talking about is that for Christians, when you find yourselves in trials, what you can understand about that trial is that it can grow your faith, that you can be strengthened by it. That the trial itself isn't good, that you shouldn't be happy about it, but at least you can find joy knowing that God can do something with it, and that you can find perfection through it, that you can be strengthened to face it. What he's talking about is finding endurance. You know that the testing of your faith produces endurance. That's the goal. Because in finding our endurance, it's meant to be a strong patience. Not one that's lackadaisical about it, that does nothing about the problem, but one that patiently challenges it in a satisfying Christian response to say, this isn't right, and I'm going to work against it, but I'm not going to let it change who I am. And it's not going to make me forget what God has done for me. And it's not going to make me feel defeated, and I'm going to know I can make it through. And in this, we grow as Christians. Trials, problems are not good in themselves, but they can be used for good and provide us perspective in our lives. For through them, we draw closer to the one who gives us strength. Sometimes it's in trials that we feel the strength of God the most. When things are going well, we can feel separated and apart. And what James is saying, know this. At least in your trial, you can know that you're close to God. For through them, your faith is then strengthened and you are made complete. But then he brings up a point about doubt. And this is the hard part. But ask in faith, never doubting. For the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea driven and tossed by the wind. For the doubter, being double-minded and unstable in every way, must not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Now, what James is telling his audience to ask about is for wisdom. And it's this wisdom, this understanding about how we're to have perspective about trials. That's what the wisdom's for. And he tells his people, ask for it. When you're struggling, ask God for understanding. Ask him to help you see how you can persevere, what you can gain from it. But he warns them that doubt can be an issue. And what he's talking about here isn't so much intellectual doubt. I don't want you to come away to think I can never doubt about anything. That's not true. Doubting is a struggle with faith. Sometimes you're going to doubt, especially when it's a dark night of the soul, when you're struggling in the hospital bed, and you wonder, is God near? That is a part of wrestling as a human. That's not the doubt he's talking about here. The doubt he's talking about here is a person who's a divided person, who has no real fixed beliefs, who as soon as something else is presented, they run toward that they don't stick the course. So that as trouble arises, the first source of help or aid the person sees, they run toward. And if that fails, they run toward another. And if that fails, they run toward another. And they're a divided person. They have no bedrock. It's a double-mindedness. It's a person that says, well, I trust God, but I'm going to do all this more than trust in God. I believe God will see me through, but I'm not going to do it his way. The double-minded nature to say, I believe God, help me in this moment, give me wisdom, and then if it doesn't come right away, give up on it. Trials often don't take a day. Problems, sadly, often take a lifetime. Many of the things we face in cycles. Many of the things the world faces, we face in cycles. And when we don't get immediate answers, doubt is the person that runs away. So faith is the answer. This is our basic for today. The thing to get from this passage. What is this aspect of faith? Faith is a big topic, but there's an aspect here about it that I want us to latch on to. And it is this: the ability to see through persecution or trial or hardship or doubt and find harmony with God by simply trusting in God for wisdom. I'll say that again. An aspect of faith is your ability that when you're going through persecution, that you find harmony with God by simply trusting in God to give you wisdom. A wisdom that guides your actions and is consistent with the path of Christ. Doubt, unstableness is the person that abandons that path of Christ. What this means in practice, my friends, is to hold on. That's what it means. It's not about blind trust, but a faith with a true vision. I'm not asking you to say, well, God will solve it all and it'll be okay. What I'm asking you to say is, I know God will see me through this. I might not know the outcome tomorrow. I do know the full end, but I know God will see me through this. That's the vision. I'm not preaching to you to just think everything will be better tomorrow. For you to just hold on to your faith in God and hope it'll all work out. In the long run, yes. Eternity is a reality, and we're going to make it there. Tomorrow, though, that might still be bad. For the here and now, for those of you struggling, what I'm preaching, what James is saying, is that you have a choice to make, really. You can either see your problems as something you face alone, something to overcome and get through alone, relying on the resources that the world offers you that you can grasp at and hope that they'll get the job done. Or you can face the problems with Jesus on your side. Not that it'll magically go away. Christianity isn't just an 8-ball magic system where all the problems magically solved. But it does promise that you can know you'll have strength, the endurance to walk through them for however long it is that you face them. That in the end, they will be nothing compared to the glory of Christ to come. And that in this time between now and then, they can serve to help you attain toward the reality of Christ in your life, to the Holy Spirit alive in you. That's the choice. That's what we offer to the world, to say faith isn't just really an abstract concept. Faith is something that gives you life amidst problems. Do you want help? Do you want to know that even if everything else fails you, God won't? That you'll make it through? That all the suffering you'll ever have, He's done and lived through Himself for you, so you don't have to do it alone. That any mistake you've made, any trial you face, you don't do alone. That's faith. That's what we have to offer to the world. Because, friends, I know many people struggle. We hide it. We pretend it's okay, especially when we come to church or go out in the world. Especially when we are in the world and not in our homes. We like to pretend things are fine, even as they're falling apart. And what James wanted the church to know, what he wants you to know, what I want you to know, is that if you're in that place, when it seems like it's falling apart, God is still there with you to help you walk out of that crumbling wreck to a life and a joy filled with hope. Would you pray with me today? Lord, I thank you that you are a God greater than our problems, both the small ones we face and the greater ones of the world around us. So I do ask that you give us wisdom. I ask that you help us focus and know that you are near, and we might better live our lives each and every day. We ask this in your holy name. Amen.